Scientists say failing to act on the potential economic and social consequences could lead to an explosion of new hotspots of severe hunger and malnutrition around the globe. I spoke to Maximo Torrero, the Assistant Director General for Economic and Social Development at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. I asked him about the possible long-term and short-term impacts on food supply chains in some of the world's most vulnerable countries.
And what we are observing today, we can split it in two types of commodities, what we call staple commodities, which is maize, corn, wheat, soybeans, and rice, and the high-value commodities, which is fruits, vegetables, meat, and other like milk and fish. In the case of the staple commodities, what we know is that we have sufficient stocks, close to double what we had in 2007 and 2008. We have very good harvest this year in all the commodities, and it's capital intensive, meaning lack of labor doesn't affect this sector. What this means is that the only problem was logistical, and the logistics were complex 2 to 3 weeks ago in some of the key exporting countries, but most of them has been resolved. But that period of uncertainty of logistics creates some countries to overreact and create some export restrictions. In the case of the high-value commodities, the story is a little bit more complex. No? Why? Because they are labor intensive, so they require labor. And labor is being reduced because of the lockdown, but also because of the health issues, and also because people doesn't want to go to work because they're afraid. Second, they are more perishable, so any logistical delay will affect the commodities, and that's why we are observing producers of milk that they cannot move their milk on time, and therefore they have to get rid of it, and also in strawberries and many other commodities. And third, the processing part of the high-value commodities is a little bit more complicated because the packaging, for example, requires a lot of labor-intensive activities. A lot of people very close together, and that's why we are observing the problems we are observing in meat in the U.S., where there is a lot of positive cases, and that make the biggest processing meat plant in the U.S. to close 4 of the 5 plants because of the number of positive cases.
What can be done? I mean, what would we like to see change now?
We need to make the invisible visible. What this means is that there will be new hotspots of severe hunger and severe food insecurity. And we need to look at them. We need to identify and quickly develop indicators like our food insecurity experience scale, which allow us with 8 questions to identify if a household is food insecure, is severely food insecure. Because all these urban areas that are being affected will be moving, and we need to identify where they are so that the safety net programs can look at them. Let me give you an example. Bangladesh. Bangladesh depends a lot on clothing industry. The clothing industry has received a significant shock because they expect a very low demand. So you will have an enormous amount of workers that will lose their jobs, and they will be food insecure for a period of time. So we need to, first of all, to find ways to expand the safety net mechanisms to help those. In terms of the productive side, what we need to do is a little bit more complicated because essentially we were expecting before a V-shaped recovery. Now what we are expecting is a U-shaped recovery, and we don't know how long the base of the U will be. It could be 12 months, it could be 18 months. It will depend on many aspects that we don't know really.
Sometimes the governments aren't cooperative. You know, the people need the food or need the help, but the governments aren't particularly cooperative. Are you finding that right now that the environment is such that governments are cooperative and they want to join with you and others to try to find solutions to these issues?
I think in that sense, more cooperation is happening and countries are understanding that export restrictions is not a way to go. In terms of the continent of the most vulnerable countries, are they cooperating with each other? We had a very good meeting with all the ministers organized by FAO and the African Union, and there seems to be a lot of cooperation of ideas on how to move forward. Let's hope that will allow us to move into this interregional trade option because the world is too interlinked and this cannot be resolved by one country. They have to work together.
Are you seeing any spoilage issues or waste? I mean, would spoilage mean things can't get moved to market fast enough because the world is almost at a standstill?
Yes, we are observing. We have a very careful definition. One thing is losses, which goes from the plot to the wholesale market. That's what we call losses. The post-harvest losses is from the post-harvest to the wholesale market, and then retail to consumer is called waste. No. On the losses side, in the high-value commodities, we are seeing significant problems because food cannot be delivered, so it doesn't arrive the wholesale market, and that's increasing the losses significantly. And also on the waste side, what we are observing in certain parts of the world is that there is overconsumption, overpurchasing, panic buying, which is unnecessary today because food is available. And that will end in waste. No? And also, of course, food that is getting close to the retail or in the retail, but it cannot be sold because of mobility issues. We hope that this will improve, and we hope, especially the waste, because the behavioral issue can be improved because it doesn't make any sense to waste food today. And also, in the case of the losses, the idea is that for food banks, for example, to start playing a bigger role, and they need to collect this food and they need to distribute to the most needed. That's where I think the change could be.